Welcome. So, I've been doing these live shows now for over a year. And in the course of that year, I have been asked a lot of questions about witchcraft, shadow work, and energy work. I've probably been asked hundreds of questions. And so, in tonight's special episode, I pulled together 10 of my favorite questions, the questions I think are most relevant to the community that I think a lot of people may also be wondering about. I put them together in one episode tonight. So, merry meet. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. This episode is all about what questions people have about witchcraft, shadow work, and energy work. So I'm going to start with my top 10 questions that I pulled together. I have 5 new ones this week that people have sent me. And if you are here live with me, feel free to put questions in the chat and I'll be answering those as well as we go along and at the end. If you're watching back on YouTube later, make sure to subscribe to the channel Body Mind Witchcraft so you won't miss any future episodes. And if you're here and you like what you're hearing, leave a thumbs up or a heart somewhere along the way. It just helps us get this out into the feed of more people. So I am going to dive right in and begin answering some questions. So this first question was sent to me by Nancy a while ago. And I really love this question because I think that there are a lot of people out there who are also wondering something similar. So she asks, how do I tap into more energy and how do I stop putting out more energy than I take in? And she says, basically, I'm having an energy balancing issue and just wondering for a little bit of advice here. So I think that a lot of people are probably in a similar situation. Many people who come to this path are givers, and they often find that they're giving more energy than they are receiving, and that people are taking more than they're giving, right, when it comes to this. So here's some advice that I have for anybody in a situation like this. So, like I mentioned, this is a tough one for a lot of people, and especially the more sensitive, giving, and empathic people. And that's a lot of us here in this group. So, first of all, what I would say to anybody who feels that they're over giving or feels like there's an energy imbalance, I would say to check your grounding. Your grounding is going to be very important for you because what people who are extremely sensitive or empathic will find is that they tend to be up in the higher chakras, which means that we are losing grounding in the lower ones. So my first advice would be for this person, anybody who feels that they're giving more energy than they're taking in, would be really to focus on the root chakra. Now, in traditional Chinese medicine, they tell us that we take in some of our qi. So, qi is the energy that we all have. And whether we call it qi in traditional Chinese medicine or we call it prana, if we're studying yogic traditions, or we might call it Newman in other traditions, we need more energy, right? So we give energy, we need to take some in. So in traditional Chinese medicine, there's this belief that we actually take in energy from the ground, from the earth. And so for this reason, walking barefoot can be very helpful for people, and you can do that outside, but even in your own house, it can really feel quite good. I don't wear shoes very much. I wear socks a lot, but even when I take the socks off, I notice that there is this connection to the ground that I don't have when there's cloth covering my feet. So that can be a first step, is just really take off your shoes every once in a while and ground and walk on the earth, and you will actually pick up energy from the earth that way. So there's a way to intake energy. Now, another thing to consider for someone who feels like they're, giving more energy than they are taking is you can start to draw in that energy. So if you feel like you're depleted and you stand on the ground, make sure that you are really paying attention to your feet and the way they ground down. So on our foot, we have these 3 spots, and I'm going to show it on my hand because it's easier than lifting up my foot. But we have these 3 spots. So we have the mound underneath the big toe and the mound underneath the little toe, and then we have the mound at the heel. And so what happens is many of us are kind of off balance a lot of the time and we don't even realize it. So when you're truly trying to ground, you want to make sure that you're putting your weight down on those 3 spots. And once you do that, you stand still like that, try to keep a nice spine. I even suggest imagining a cord kind of attached to the crown or the head that's pulling it up towards the sky. This helps lengthen the spinal cord. And then from there, just begin with every inhale, begin to pull energy up through your feet, up through those 3 spots on each foot. And then you can imagine drawing that energy up through your spine. And that's naturally going to move through the chakras. So even if you don't know very much about the chakras, if you imagine drawing that energy through your spine, you're going to be sure that you hit every single one. So that would be my first thought about for someone who says they're giving more than they're taking in. And then anybody who's also in that situation should probably look at what is going on kind of emotionally, right, and mentally as well. So that first step is with the energy. But you really want to make sure that you are taking enough time for yourself. This is where self-care practices really come in, especially if you are, in a position where you're interacting with a lot of people, you're picking up a lot of energy from them, and you don't even have to be in like a helping profession. You don't have to be a counselor to be taking in people's energy. So even people who find that they work in customer service, when they're especially empathic and sensitive, they are always taking in people's energy. Okay, so another thing that you can do is when you come home from those jobs, any job where you feel you're interacting with people and you're just all that residue, all that energetic residue is being picked up by you, is try to send energy back to its source. So you can sit quietly in a meditative state and you can just imagine any of that energy that isn't yours. So just kind of scan your energy centers, the energy around your body. And if you can do this, you may notice that there are some kind of cords attached to you. You may notice that if you could sense energy in that way. And then what you can do is you can just gently just release those cords or cut them. I like to imagine having a selenite athame or something and cutting those cords and just sending them back to where they came from, so that when you go to sleep, the energy that you're going to sleep with is just your own. Now, if you can't visualize that energy or you can't really even sense it when you try that, that's okay. You're still going to do the same thing, kind of close your eyes, get into your kind of energy field, just make a mental command to get there, and then just take that athame, and even if you can't feel it, just move that selenite athame just around you, imagine moving it around you, and just again, just sending back all energy that is not yours to its proper place with harm to none. Okay, so that can be a really good way to help out when you are finding that you're giving more than you're receiving. And just saying hello to those who are joining me. For a moment, I couldn't see any comments, so I started to panic a little bit, and I hit a button, and now I can see them. So hi, Amy and Melinda and Christy are all here. So saying hi to you guys. So again, if anybody has any questions, I'm answering questions about anything tonight, witchcraft, shadow work, energy work. So feel free to drop those in the chat. Or if you got stuff that relates to the questions I'm on right now, you can put in your comments too. All right, so the next question is another really good one that I like a lot. So for those who are joining us now and missed the beginning, I'm going through 10 of my favorite questions that have been sent to me over the past year. And these are questions I feel are relevant to more than just the person who sent them, and just questions that I really liked a lot. All right, so this next question came from Angela originally, but I've been asked this question multiple times in the past year, so I know this is something that other people are wondering about. So she asked, do you have to believe in deities to be a witch? So this is a great question. I was asked it yesterday, in fact. And so let me give my opinion on it. So my opinion is no. You do not have to do anything to be a witch. You follow your own path. That's the beauty of a spirituality like this one. So plenty of witches do not work with deities, and some witches work with like divine energy, but they might not necessarily call it a deity per se. So let's kind of talk about why people might adopt different approaches to deities, and then hopefully some of this will resonate with you. So sometimes people just simply, they don't want to work with the deities. They don't really feel any need to. There's no call to do it. Other people feel called. They'll sometimes get a call from a certain deity, or they'll see signs and symbols showing up outside in the world around them, and that feels like it's a deity that's speaking to them. Other people just never have that desire or that need. And then some people just simply don't believe in deities. Maybe they believe in divine energy. They might believe in the universe, but they don't necessarily believe in deities. And then still other people might be coming from Abrahamic religions where they had a monotheistic deity that wasn't always very nice. And that can make it really difficult. There can be a strained relationship there. It's kind of like if you had a strained relationship with your father, you will probably have issues surrounding fatherhood or different aspects of fatherhood as you move through your life, like unless those are resolved. So people may feel that they're just didn't have a good experience in church, and so they don't really want to work with a god or a goddess. So absolutely, there's no need to have a deity in order to work with a witch. But I will say is that sometimes people who don't work with the deities per se, they may find that working with the archetypal energy resonates with them. So what I mean by that is there are archetypal energies, and our gods and our goddesses of the various pantheons fall into these archetypal energies. So let's take, for example, Earth Mother. Okay, so Earth Mother is a general statement, right? So we might say that there's some people will even say, I work with Mother Earth. So they're working kind of with that archetypal energy. And that doesn't mean that it's not real. We should definitely make sure that we know that. It doesn't mean that it's not real. It just means that it's not specified. It's not been manifested, or I should say, it has not really been made manifest into like a deity form. And then other people still will work with Mother Earth just kind of as a deity in and of itself, a general deity, the Great Mother. But for those who are working with that archetypal energy, Mother Earth, that energy could take the form of Gaia, it could take the form of Pachamama, it could take the form of many different earth-based deities, Ceres, Demeter. And so when you're working with the archetypal energy, you are simply just working with that earth energy, and then perhaps while working with it, one of those other deities may call to you. You may become interested in the myths of them. And so one of the things I also I want to mention here, is that if you go to other people's rituals, like we hold rituals online every Sabbath, and for our membership, we hold them every dark moon. And so what I always recommend for people is if they don't really work with deities in their practice, or they're really kind of uncomfortable with deities, and we're calling them, because we do call them in our tradition, I recommend that people think of that as archetypal energy. So, for example, if we were calling Pachamama in a ritual like we did last Mabon and may do again this year, you would then think of that more as just earth energy, earth mother. So that's just a way of, I wanted to add that in. It's just a way that you can still, without really working with deities or even believing in them, it's the way that you can go to other people's rituals and still feel like comfortable and you're getting something out of it. But the bottom line here is no, you absolutely do not have to work with deities to be a witch. And in fact, there's very few hard and fast rules in witchcraft. So usually when someone says, do I have to do this to be a witch? The answer is usually no. All right, so moving on to my next question. Okay, here. And again, if you're here live, feel free to put in any questions or comments in here. Looks like I have to like keep refreshing them because I'm not really seeing all the comments here. Weird. Okay, number 3. I think this is a really good question. So this question was originally asked by Danielle, and it is one that I know is relevant to people because I've heard other people asking about it. So this question is about time. So this is something that people struggle with big time. And when it comes to time for your own spiritual practice, she says, how do you find the time? And a lot of people are in a similar situation, a lot of work, responsibilities with family and pets and various things like that. And it can be really hard. Life's very busy. So she said life gets so busy, especially when there are rituals and celebrations coming. And she said, I want to be part of everything. I want to work on my spiritual practice, but how do you find the time? So here is my best answer, and there's a couple parts to it. So the first part is about your own spiritual practice. So one thing that gets in the way of a lot of people is they think that it has to take a lot of time. You have to do hours and hours of this devotional practice in order for it to be useful. And that is not true. And it's a big thing that stands in people's way. And so I just want to remove that obstacle right now. You do not need a lot of time to really enhance your spiritual practice and move yourself and evolve yourself spiritually. All you really need is 5 or 10 minutes on most days. And I recommend to really try to make it a habit, of really practice. We want to have the repetition. So I really do stress that most days. But I also encourage people, even in my educational therapy practice with children, I tell them when it comes to our language, we want to try not to use really extreme language like I'm going to do that every single day, because inevitably we're going to fail, and then that just gets complicated, and then eventually we may just stop doing what we're doing. So most days means that you have room to not do it on some days. Okay, so what I would say is you would commit yourself to like 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you can, but 5 minutes is enough. And you're going to do something on most days. And that thing can be the same thing every day, or you can vary it, like there's 7 days a week or 5 days of your week that you're going to do it. And you can do something each of those days. And there's lots of different ideas, like candle gazing, which is basically just taking a candle and staring at the flame, and you do that for 5 minutes. And this is a very good meditative practice that can open the third eye. And then you've done your spiritual practice for the day. Or sitting down and listening to some binaural beats and drawing a few oracle or tarot cards, right? That would take about 5 minutes, and there you go. Or sitting down and doing 5 minutes of relaxing breath work. Even just paying attention to your breath or trying to extend your exhale, that will always bring down the central nervous system. 5 minutes of that, and you've got your spiritual practice. So the big obstacle for many people is they don't know what to do, and they think it has to be really long, and those two things are not true. So just kind of remove that blockage out of the way. Now, the second part of this is she asked about like celebrations and different things that she wanted to go to. And those things are longer than 5 minutes, right? So how do you find the time in your busy day? And that can be a little bit trickier. So the good news is that many places, if they're online, they might offer replays. You can do things in your own time. But another thing that I have done in the past when I feel like there's not enough hours in the day and I just can't get things done is just to ask the universe to slow down time. And I know that sounds strange, but if you really think about time, there's a perceptual element to time, right? Time doesn't really exist. It's a man-made construction. I mean, there's universal time. Yes, there's the movement of the planets and the rising and setting of the suns and the moons and everything. But this time that we've created is a man-made construction. So if we ask the universe to stretch out time, it's hard to say how that happens. Does time really? Does maybe our perception of it changes? Or perhaps we become more efficient in our work? Who knows what the mechanism is? But I've found that this can sometimes work. So you really have to believe in it. You just have to put that intention out there just for now. Ask your angels or your guides or whoever you work with or the universe in general. I need time to slow down for me today so I can get everything done. And just experiment with that and see what happens, because I've had some good success with it, even as strange as it sounds. But at the end of the day, coming back to that idea of just your own spiritual practice, just making sure you're doing something small every day, that will be enough. Okay. Let me see. Okay, going on to the next one. It's strange here because I'm not seeing these most recent comments. So keep putting comments in. I see like 3 comments of people saying hello. I'm not seeing other ones. So I'm going to keep going on to question 4. Okay, so this next question is about meditation. And this one comes from Angela. Again, she's got some good questions here. So she said, what's the best type of meditation for a busy mind? So I know there's a lot of people wondering about this. So the best type of meditation is the type of meditation that works best for you. And that's going to be different for all people. So I really recommend experimenting with meditation. So we have this idea in the West that we need to sit, stick straight and close our eyes and be in lotus position and clear our minds of all thoughts, and that's meditation. And that's true. That's a form of meditation, but it's not the only kind. And it doesn't have to be the right one for you. And many people will find that one doesn't work, and then they'll come to me and they'll say, I can't meditate. And I usually will say to them, it's because you haven't found the right type yet. So with a busy mind, the thing that a person with a busy mind probably wants to do, especially if they want to try to do more of a traditional meditation later, is they probably want to warm up with some breath work or some mantras. And so what this is going to do is it's going to cool down the mind, it's going to quiet it to get the person into a state where maybe they'll be more receptive for that type of seated or lying down meditation that we think of as traditionally in the West. Now, the other thing that you can do is if your mind is really scattered. So what happens when the mind is really scattered, there's usually two things that are going on energetically. And it may be one or the other, or it might be both. And one thing might be that the root is weakened. So the root chakra has got some imbalances in it when we're feeling like the mind is very, very scattered. And then the other thing can be that the air element in you is too much. So air is that element of thought, and so it could be that there's too much air. And so what we can do to kind of calm that, like too much air, is we can bring in other elements like water. That's like a really good one in earth, okay? Because those are going to ground us down. So the other thing I've recommended in the past is that people really find that like the mind is very scattered and they are open to trying some herbal things that are safe for most people. I recommend there is an amino acid called theanine. It's spelled Theanine. It's very, very good. It's good for sleeping and it's good for calming people down. You can take it during the day. Many people tolerate it during the day. Others find it puts them to sleep, and so they take it at night. But it's very good. It's amino acid. Like I said, you can get it in the drugstore. You can order it. Another thing is lemon balm. And another one is kava. Though kava you want to be a little bit careful with because if people have like any addiction problems, they generally recommend do not try kava. It has kind of a similar mechanism. So just be careful if there's any addiction history. Just be careful with kava. And then another really good one that you don't really have to be careful with is passion flower. So lemon balm and passion flower, those are also very good for calming the mind. So a person who has a mind that is really scattered may benefit from trying those before they meditate. And you can get passion flower and lemon balm in like tinctures. And you put that in a little bit of juice or water, and it's pretty fast acting. And then the other thing is you really have a lot of trouble with calming your mind. I would try to go to an herbalist or a naturopath if none of those like easier ones work, and just see if there's recommendations they can make. But a person who is who's tried this sitting meditation or lying down meditation for a long time and it's just not working, should probably experiment with other types of meditation, because there is movement meditation. So walking in and of itself is meditation, and you can just start. You just need to get a hallway or a piece of grass or something outside that is where you could take about 10 to 15 paces or steps, and you just start on one side and you just walk 10 or 15 steps, and you turn around and you come back, and you just do this over and over. It's very clearing of the mind. But for those who have like a really active mind, you're going to have the same benefit here, except we're moving, and so it might be very helpful. This actually can be very helpful. And so another type is labyrinth meditation. So if you are fortunate enough to have a labyrinth near you, sometimes like there's a cemetery here that has one, and you can go there and you can just walk it. So it's another kind of form of walking meditation. You just walk to the inside and walk to the outside. You can even build these. You have a big enough backyard, you could build one of these just out of rocks and stones. And a labyrinth, by the way, is not a maze. Sometimes people think it's a maze. A labyrinth is usually just a circular path that leads to the center and then leads back out. It's not something you're supposed to get lost in, but it can be very meditative. And so that would probably be my recommendation. And then also movement meditation or intuitive movement is just where you can put on some kind of soothing music or music that you really like a lot, and close your eyes, and then you just begin to move in the way that your body wants to move. So these would be my recommendations for those who have a really busy mind and traditional meditation doesn't seem to be working. Okay, so I am going on to the next question. So this next question was from Jen, and she said, how can you tell the difference between familiars and spirit animals? I've been asked this a lot, so I thought this is relevant to more than just her. And then she said, what is the difference and how do they affect, enhance our practices? Okay, so the answer here is there may be a bit of disagreement with the answer, depending on who you ask, but I'm going to give you this is the generally accepted response, probably. So, a spirit animal is an animal that arrives as a guide in your life. And this may be in dreams, it may be in meditations, it may be in waking dream states. So, you could be just kind of walking and you end up in sort of like a hypnagogic, dreamlike state, especially if you're doing something repetitive. You sometimes fall into that. You're sweeping the floor, you're vacuuming. So, these animals may come to you, they may come to you out in nature. It may be an animal that you're seeing a lot that's clearly there. It's trying to talk to you in some way. It's trying to bring some kind of a message to you. And they may be there. So, an animal guide can be there to warn you, it can be there to help you, it can be there to test you, offer guidance. But the main thing here is that they've come as a guide, They're bringing insight to you. And usually they will try to contact you. So it's usually it can be, so you're just Googling things and you just see a certain animal that's always coming up all the time. That's a good chance that they're trying to contact you. You see that same animal outside. It doesn't have to be the same exact one, but that same species over and over outside when you're out and about. That's a good chance that they're trying to contact you. Now, an animal guide may appear at specific times in your life, so there can be like transition periods, so periods where you've experienced deaths or births or changes of your life status. This is where they can show up as well. So you really want to pay attention to these repeated appearances. They're very important. And then just watch your synchronicities that are around you. And not just the particular animal, but imagery related as well. So it doesn't actually have to be the physical animal. It could be that likeness of that animal or references to that animal as well. So generally, we don't choose our animal guides or our spirits. So it's not just necessarily an animal that we like. It's usually an animal that has contacted us or is just appearing to us frequently. And then it's up to us to try to figure out what that wisdom is from them. And you could definitely ask them. You can go into meditative states and try to speak to them, or do animal guide meditations that will try to get you into that place where maybe they'll come and they'll be able to give you some insight into why they're there, why they keep appearing to you. And oftentimes they won't appear until you're ready to see them. Now, on the flip side of that, we have the familiar. And so some people use these interchangeably, these words, but the familiar is a word that's interestingly not really used outside of witchcraft or shamanism. Whereas we hear animal guide, we might hear that all over outside in different circles. But you really don't hear this word familiar outside of witchcraft and shamanism. Now, this is usually considered the magical helper of a witch. And so sometimes this is a pet, but not all pets are necessarily familiars. Some might be, definitely will be, but not all. The word itself seems to come from the Middle Ages of France. And back then, it would have been used to refer to domesticated animals, so your dogs and cats and things like that, but also sheep and cows, frogs, lizards, moths, birds could also be in the category. And these animals typically would aid the witch in their work. So they might show up in magical rituals, they might show up during spell work or other magical workings. So if you have a pet or another animal, so let's say an animal that has just kind of visits you, and let's say you're doing your circles, your magical workings, and you're noticing that this animal is always here, animals that kind of want to climb into your lap when you are working or meditating or doing things like that, good chance that those are familiars. So this is really the basic difference. So it comes down to animal guides or spirit guides. Spirit animals are usually there as messengers, as guides, just like the word says, and then our familiars tend to be our magical helpers. And I should note too that those familiars, when they cross over, they can continue to aid us from the other side, as our familiars too. So if you're really interested in it, I recommend the author Ted Andrews. He has a book called Animal Speak, I believe it's called. Animal Speak, Ted Andrews. Very good book, and it gets into all of this in great depth, and it includes some animal guide meditations as well. Okay, Number 6. This is about shadow work. So the next couple of questions are about shadow work. And so we're going to start with the question from Wilma. And she said, how do I start? So this is a question a lot of people come to me and they say, I'm interested in shadow work. I've been hearing this word going around. How do I begin? So there's really not a right or a wrong answer to this. The shadow work path, like the witchcraft path, is one that you carve out yourself. But I think the most important thing for people to remember about shadow work and witchcraft, for that matter, is that it's not a linear path, it's a circular one, it's a spiral one, which means that we aren't really imagining that we're going to start in one place and we're going to end in one place and then we're going to have everything mastered. It's a continuous walking of a path that we begin to walk on it, and then at some points it seems like we're going backwards, but really what we're doing is we're kind of evolving upward. But when we evolve upward, we have to come around that circle again, right? So it starts to feel like we're in the same place, but we're higher now. And maybe we don't realize that. So it's really important for us to kind of notice that if we feel like we keep going back to the same places in our studies and our work, it could just simply be that we're returning back to kind of revisit lessons. But we have to remember that we have elevated in some way. If we're doing our work, we're moving. We're not moving backwards. We're moving forwards. So the real thing that people need is a place to start. So if you're trying to do shadow work on your own, my best bet for you is to start with anything that's really going to start to unlock your shadow aspects for you. So your shadow aspects, for those who are very new to shadow work, your shadow aspects are parts of the personality that have been splintered off from you, usually at a very early age. They're considered something that does not belong to you, even though it does. So unconsciously, we push it off. But in reality, these are still aspects of us. And so for us to become whole, to really step into our full magical gifts, we really want to try to find that wholeness within. And not only that, it takes a lot of energy for us to push out those aspects of ourselves that we think aren't ours. And that's energy, in my opinion, that can be used for greater things, for elevating yourself spiritually, for working on your magical and spiritual gifts. And so when we start to face those aspects of us and we begin to acknowledge them, and we say, okay, yeah, I get that. That is part of me. If not only does it help us interact with others better because we start to see the ways that we are interacting with others that it at one point might have seemed like out of our control, like unconscious. And when those come into the light, we start to see our roles and things, and we actually start to remedy them because of that. So the other thing is that out in that shadow, we also have great gifts as well. There's a lot of creative energy in the shadow because, again, these are things that kind of got broken off from the personality. So some of these are aspects of ourselves that aren't accepted by society. So these are all like the negative personality traits that we all have. Those are out in the shadow. But there's also the roles that we tried on and the hats we put on as kids that we didn't continue with. And those are out there too. So you can find a lot of creative energy out there when you're doing your shadow work. So what I recommend is one of the easiest places for people to start is to look at their triggers. So if you've never done shadow work before, I would look at the triggers, the things that irk you and annoy you, the people that bug you, get under your skin, and start to analyze that. Because honestly, those things, those people outside of you that are bugging you, that are irking you, that are underneath your skin, that are triggering you, they actually have something to teach you because that's an aspect of you that you've rejected, that you are not acknowledging. So that can be a good place to start. Now, another place to start is like in your dreams as well. So just exploring your dreams for different symbols and messages. They're trying to get messages through to you. And you can also use active imagination, which is an interesting thing. You get into a kind of light meditative state. It's not really just meditation. You get into this light meditative state, and then you can begin to explore some shadow work prompts. And so if you've never done this before, I would Google shadow work prompts, and you're going to find hundreds of them. And just pick a couple questions that seem kind of interesting to you. Get in a really relaxed state. You can lie down if you want, and then just kind of contemplate these questions and see what comes up for you. So that would be my best bet for somebody who's starting out on shadow work, doesn't really know where to begin. Now, once you do the shadow work and you maybe started there and you find that you want more guidance, then you can look for mentors. You can look for groups that do shadow work. We have a shadow work membership called Shadow Work Seekers. We work on shadow work and energy work in it. And so those can be options for people who want to go to the next step. Okay, so the next question related to this then is how do you know that the shadow work is working? So once you start doing it, how do you know it's working? Well, one of the things that you want to look for are the changes inside of you. So one thing would be you're not getting as triggered as much. So those outside things, you'll start to all of a sudden notice that thing used to bug me and that is not bothering me anymore. That's often going to be the first aha for a lot of people. I used to do that in that situation, and now I'm not doing that. So that is a good sign that your shadow work is working. Um, you no longer blame those who trigger you as well. That's another thing. So when people are triggering us, they have their own set of things, but the trigger itself is triggering something inside of us. It's telling us, hey, you should look into that. You should explore that. So rather than us putting all that outside blame on them, it's not to say that, let's say they did something mean or bad to us. It's not to say that it's not, there's no fault of their own, or they didn't hurt us in some way, but we can use those opportunities as ways to really reflect on ourselves. And that's where we kind of stop blaming them as much and we use it as opportunities to further our own growth. Because at the end of the day, you're not here on earth. Nobody incarnated here on earth. I have a teacher who, one of my yoga teachers always says this. Nobody incarnated here on earth to worry about all these other people and what they're doing. You incarnated here on earth to worry about you. So useful to advice to think about whenever we're kind of getting wrapped up in what other people are doing, and we're not able to kind of turn that around and just see how I could further myself through this situation. And then another way that you know that shadow work is working is you're judging yourself less, you're judging other people less. Your judgments honestly stem from your own unhealed places. So when you start to heal those places, you start to judge less. And you can also recognize how you trigger others. That's an interesting one too. So we are triggering other people. We're triggering their shadow parts that are inside of us. So when you start to see your role triggering others, that's a good sign that you are doing some good work. You may find more peace and calmness. That's another indication that this work is working, and you're no longer afraid of your own darkness. Okay, so that would be how do you know that shadow work is working? And this question also, this one was from Tanessa. She said, is it a long process? And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Like, you can do a lot of shadow work, just through doing the prompts or things like that. But shadow work isn't a one and done thing. It's many say it's a lifetime process. And it goes on and on and on, but it's very, very, to me, there's people who say it's the most authentic way to finding enlightenment. I say it's like the alchemizing your soul. It's the work that we've got to do if we really want to up level spiritually. This is one of the best ways to do it. So just know it's not a long it's not a short process. It's not generally an easy process, but it's a very rewarding one. And then, another question to go along with shadow work is a very good one, because I get asked this a lot. Is shadow work evil? Is shadow work dark magic or dark witchcraft? So I get asked this a lot. I think that sometimes people find our group, Body, Mind, Witchcraft, and they're not quite sure what we're doing here. And they don't really understand what shadow work is. They might think this is dark witchcraft. And so I guess it depends on how you define dark witchcraft. But the common misconception is this idea of light and dark, and this idea that light is good and dark is evil. And this is a construction of the patriarchy, essentially. So it is important for us to remember where that conditioning comes from, this idea that dark is bad and light is good. It's coming from that patriarchal attempt to subvert the divine feminine and to discredit it in any way, to discredit the goddess, to discredit intuition, anything that is connected to those more feminine energies. All things about the divine feminine were cast out by the patriarchy, and that includes healing, any non-medical healings. There's a lot of discrediting of healing that is not traditional Western medicine. There is herbs and herbalism, all of that being discredited, tarot, divination, magic, and witchcraft. All these things go along with the divine feminine, the old gods, the unconscious. And in some cases, even psychology gets discredited because it is a threat, honestly. All of this is a threat. So it's important for us to remember that this is systematic suppression that serves a purpose of control. And so it was deemed by the patriarchy to be very threatening. So we always have to remember that, okay? So when people are thinking that maybe going down into the unconscious and doing that deeper work is evil, we just have to remember where those ideas of evil come from. Because again, it poses a threat to the patriarchy, uh, a system that seeks control if we have people trying to take control of their own lives, right? So shadow work is not evil at all, at all. And dark magic is also not necessarily evil, but it's not what shadow work is. So like I mentioned in the previous question, shadow work is going down, it's going down into the unconscious, it's finding those shadow aspects that we've rejected, it's acknowledging them, it's befriending them, it's letting go of the things that aren't ours. That's not really dark magic at all. Shadow work is not about cursing or removing curses. Sometimes I get asked about that. So it's just really important for us to clear up those common misconceptions. Okay, number 9. This question is, let's see, this one says, I really liked this one a lot. And there's a reason for that. This one is very specific to the person who was asking it, but I want to use this question as a way to tell people and just give people advice about the situation. Okay, so she said, this one was from a while back. This was back in February. I got this question. I was trying to get Akashic Records read, and the girl said that my heart and my sacral chakras and throat chakra are so closed up, and she said I can't achieve a reading until I remove them. Okay, so here's my advice about this. This is not really even a question. She's just stating it. But I want to take this moment to warn people about when you go places and people tell you that you can't go further with work until you remove blockages or curses or things like that. And then they tell you that they can do it. I just want you to use caution, because a lot of times I don't want to necessarily say these are scams, but when people tell you you can't move forward in your path unless you talk to them or you use them or you get this done, it's just a warning for you to listen to your intuition. Really listen to your intuition. Does that resonate with you? Does it sound to you like this is the only person that can help you? Because I will tell you, in the case of this person who sent me this message, you can absolutely do an Akashic reading with having blockages in your chakras, because most of us have blockages in our chakras. So just a warning. I just really liked that question a lot. You should also be wary of people who tell you that they have the only way. Because when it comes to witchcraft and it comes to shadow work and it comes to energy work and anything on this path, there is not one way to tread. There's not one path to travel on. The path is yours to decide. You have way more power than you think you have. You really know you have so much power to heal yourself. You have so much power to, really tap into your intuition. You can learn how to do that from other people, but just be wary of people who tell you that they have the only answers. Okay? So that's my my warning for people when it comes to those kinds of situations. Okay, and then finally, number 10 here. I like this question a lot. This goes going back to some energy work. So it says, when working with chakras, if the energy is going up, so we have like the energy is going up in our systems, but the lower 3 chakras are grounded. Okay, let me go back up. Okay, so what she's basically asking is, when we work with energy, we often tell people to ground down, but then we tell people to move their energy up, and so it can be confusing. So she's saying, how do I do all this? How do I know that it's working when I'm being told to ground down and move my energy up? And so this kind of goes back to that first question when I was talking about grounding. We ground down, that is the place to begin. When you can set your roots, just think about a tree. The tree doesn't start growing its leaves. It grows its roots first for a very important reason. And it grows them down enough to gain security and stability. And then once that's gained, then it begins to reach up. Okay, so the same thing happens with our energy. When we ground our energy down, then it will immediately begin to move up. Okay, it's just going to do that naturally. Now, as you work through the energetic centers, you can start to learn how to move it better, move it into certain areas, pull it up from the root into the heart and hold it there, and maybe send it out to people, or pull it up from the root into the third eye and then project it out as energy you've raised during a spell. But the first step is always grounding down, number one. So that is what I told her. Your bottom three chakras, they really work as a trinity. We work with the root and the sacral chakra and the solar plexus. That is our stability. That's our anchoring in the material world. And then from there, we just find that the upper ones and the energy in the upper centers begin to move easier. All right, so those were my top 10 questions so far. I've had lots of other good questions, and I'll probably do another episode like this eventually. This sucks. I know there's 8 comments here. I can see 3 hellos. And I keep refreshing this. I don't know why these glitches are happening in Facebook. I'm going to keep refreshing it, so hopefully I can see these. You can continue putting comments in here, because afterwards I'm going to go in, I'm going to answer anything I couldn't see during this. But here are some questions that were sent to me. I'm going to finish these up. I want to make sure I get to the questions that were actually sent to me this week as well. So Felicia asks about, how do you determine what element is dominant, or know which type of witchcraft you prefer? She says, example, kitchen witchery, etc. Okay, so 2 parts here. One is elemental. So how do you know your elemental dominance or your elemental affinity? Well, there are 3 good ways that you can know this, and oftentimes they support one another. So one thing is your astrological chart. So you don't even really have to know a lot about astrology. You can go get a chart made at astro.com for free, and there will be a little table at the very bottom of it, and it's going to show you your planets, and it's going to show you what signs they're in. And what you do is you calculate how many planets are in fire signs, how many are in earth signs, how many are in air signs, and how many are in water signs. And generally, you add extra weight to the moon, the sun, and the rising sign, or your ascendant. You give them 2 points instead of 1. And you add this all up, and you will easily see how much fire you have, how much earth, water, and air you have in your chart. So that would be the first way that you can find your elemental affinity. Now, the second way is through what we call elemental consciousness. Elemental consciousness is both constitutional and situational. So what you do here is it takes some work, and for those who are in our Demystifying Witchcraft classes, we're actually going to do this tomorrow night in class together and extend it out as some work afterwards. But I'm going to tell anybody who's not in that class, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it right now. So what you do is you list off traits of your own, personality traits about you. Okay, and so you can have 2 lists, and one list is like general traits that describe you, and the other list could be situational traits. So let's say there's a situation that you're in right now, and you want to know what elements are operating, you can write down those down as well. So if you're having trouble doing this, what I recommend you do is Google words that describe people, or adjectives that describe people, and you're going to get lists of hundreds of words, and you're just going to go down and you're going to select maybe 20 that seem to describe you, and then you're going to think about those qualities, and you're going to try to think about what kind of an element is connected to them. So let's say one of the words is inspiring. Maybe you inspire other people. Well, inspiration has to do generally with the fire element, so then you would write down fire next to it. Maybe it says you're very compassionate. So compassion has to do with the water elements. You write down water next to that. If you're having trouble figuring out what element is connected to a particular word, I recommend really using your intuition. Use the first thing that pops into your mind is often right, and we discredit that. So just practice this is a good opportunity to practice that. Just write down the first thing that comes into mind. If the word is what's the word? Generous, and into your mind pops earth, write that down. And if you're still having trouble, reach out in the Body Mind Witchcraft group and say, what elements do you think are connected to these words? And we've got 2,000 people here in the group, and they can probably help out by giving some input. So that's a way to do what we call elemental consciousness. And you can also do it situationally. So let's say you're in a situation and you're feeling scared, you're feeling nervous, Okay, so you could do that too, and then that will show you, then you connect those words to elements, that will show you what element is dominant at that time. And then that would be like the two best ways. And there is a third way, is exploring your dosha. This is an Ayurvedic idea of elemental constitution. I'm going to do an episode on this eventually. We're going to work with this in our Shadow Seekers group as well. But I'll do an episode on Body, Mind, Witchcraft on this. But if you're interested, you can Google the word dosha and you'll come up with these little quizzes that you can take, and they'll ask you a bunch of things about yourself, about your appearance and foods that you eat and different things like that. And then it will tell you what your dosha is, and that is an elemental constitution, or I should say, it's your body constitution that is then connected to elements. And a lot of people find that when they learn their dosha and they explore their astrological chart, they find that those are pretty supportive of one another. So it's very interesting. Okay, as far as types of witchcraft, it seems to be a newer concern for people. I started practicing in the late 90s and really into the early 2000s when I really began my exploration of the craft. And back then, I don't really remember people talking about what kind of a witch you are, but I hear a lot of people talking about it right now. So I don't know if it's, back then it was mostly, are you hereditary or are you non-hereditary? But now there's all these categories. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the need in the modern world to kind of know who we are, what we are, categorize ourselves, label ourselves. So I think the best thing to ask yourself is, why do you want to know this? Because you don't actually have to be a witch. You don't have to like label yourself. You don't have to say, I'm a kitchen witch, or I'm a green witch. You don't have to label yourself. You do not have to have a category, is what I'm saying. So you want to first ask yourself, why do you want to know? But after that, I'll tell you what, I like the question a lot. I've been toying with the idea anyway, so I've decided I'm going to do an episode in 2 weeks on types of witchcraft, and that'll give everybody all the different types, and you can see which ones you resonate with. Okay, so I hope that helps. Still can't see these comments. Sorry, guys. I'm going to go back in and answer anything that was here later, but I'm going to keep moving on. Anyanka, she had a good question about ancestors. She said it seems that it's common to honor one's ancestors, but I was never close to family outside of parents, siblings, and I'm fairly certain there were no witches in my family's lineage. Is it necessary to do ancestral work, and what are the benefits of doing so or not doing so? Okay, so great question. Your ancestors don't necessarily have to come from your own lineage. They could come from your past lives. They could even be ancestors of the land that you live on. So that absolutely are ancestors that you can honor as well. They can also be what Christopher Penczak calls as the witch blood, the witch ancestors. So these are simply witches, because as a witch, you have all these ancestors that don't have to be related to you ancestrally through your lineage. These are other witches. So some people just simply call the spirits of other witches. And in fact, at Samhain, in our own coven, many times we have put out a chair at the Samhain ritual to invite other ancestral witches to come to join us in this rite. We might put a crystal skull on a altar in order to encourage ancestral spirits to come in, and not necessarily ours. So you also said there are no witches in your family history, but you might be surprised. I thought that too until I took a womb working class, and the very first module they did was all about ancestry, and I checked out because I was like, I'm not really connected to my family very much. Don't really think there were any witches in my family at all. And honestly, through meditation, I was surprised to find that I got this sense that there were. So I think all of us somewhere in the past have somebody, even it could be hundreds of years ago, but have somebody who probably was a witch. Maybe didn't call themselves that, but had some kind of gifts and abilities. And so we might be surprised, even when we think they're not there, there is somebody way back in there. So what I would say, just like everything, is it's not necessary to do ancestral work. That was part of the question. Is it necessary? Not necessary to do anything, because your path is your path alone. But if you do have an interest in ancestral work, since you're asking about it, you may have an interest in this, so you can explore it in a couple of ways. So one thing is ancestral healing. So this is looking at wounds that were passed down to you from your ancestors. So I would look back at mom and grandma and great grandma and see if there's any patterns that they have, because you very well may have picked this up And through ancestral healing, you can begin to let go of some of those wounds. Like in my own family, there is a lot of fear, and I grew up very fearful. And I realized when I started doing a lot of my shadow work that some of this fear is not mine. This is my mom's and my grandma's and my great grandma's. So working to let go of that is ancestral work. And then another thing is just honoring them, or showing reverence. So you can set up a little altar, or you can just set up a bowl of milk or honey with a candle and just burn it and just kind of put that energy out into the universe. I would like to connect with any ancestors that would like to connect with me. And just putting that out into the universe can sometimes draw them in, and they may come to you in revelation, inspiration and revelation in your mind, or dreams, or things like that, or daydreams, or synchronicities. So if that doesn't get into all the question, anybody can feel free to message me later, uh, and I'll go into it more. But that would be my best answer for that question. Okay, next, this comes from Nancy. She's asking about spell work. So she said, when your intentions are true and from the heart, casting spells, regarding casting spells, she said her spells seem to not work or backfire. She says she does her cinnamon spell every month. That's for money drawing. And she said her money goes out instead of coming in. It's like my spells do the opposite. Okay, so I got some thoughts here. So it's tough when the spells seem like they're not working the way we want them to work. There can be a variety of reasons for this. So one thing is, you said that your spells backfire, but I wanted to ask you to really think about, what do you mean? So does that mean you're spending more money than usual? Or there's lots of expenses like that have all of a sudden happened? Like, so let's say you do a spell to draw money in, and then the car breaks down and now money's going out. So I'm kind of just wondering what makes you think the spells are backfiring. Now, one big thing I wanted to talk about is the universe expects us to follow up our magical work with mundane work as well. So you might want to think about, what are you doing in the mundane world that would facilitate the cinnamon spell or the magic spells, or the money spells, or anything that you're doing? What are you doing outside that could help facilitate them? So here are some ideas. Are you looking for extra hours? Are you selling things? You've got to think about, like, how would a muggle make money? Because we got to be doing that stuff too. We got to be putting ourselves out there after the magic. You may be talking to influential people that know people who have jobs or extra work or things like that. Now, you can also be more specific with the spell. So I know this spell she's talking about, and it's a spell where I do it every full, not full moon, first of the month. And you take cinnamon in your hand and you blow it in from the outside in through the front door. And there's a little chant that you say. And it's a very general spell to just simply bring prosperity and abundance into the house. But if it's not working, it's so general. That's could be why you're not seeing it working. So you can be more specific. Think about, how do you want the money to come in? Do you want more? Do you want a raise? I know Nancy is a waitress. Do you want bigger tips? So you could be very specific about it. I did a witch's ladder last night, and I was very specific about the number of hours I wanted and the exact amount of money I needed to make each week during those hours of my job. So the more specificity we have, sometimes the better these spells work out. So if you're finding yours aren't working and they're really general spells, try to be more specific. And then the other thing I would say is just continue to look at blockages. I know Nancy, she's working on her root chakra all the time. Keep working on it. It takes a long time. I've been working on mine for years. But limiting beliefs, self-doubt, working on the solar plexus. We really got to believe in the stuff that we're doing, our magical workings. That's when we're going to get the most results from them. And feelings of unworthiness, any ancestral things that we've inherited. So limiting beliefs coming from ancestors, family members who said we'll always be poor, things like that. Breaking down those limiting beliefs, combating them can be helpful. So I hope that helps. But Nancy, you're doing a good job. She's in our Shadow Seekers group, so I know her. And just keep working with that. Work with that solar plexus, work with that root chakra, and then reach out to me if you want, me to go a little deeper into some of that. Okay, next question. Got 2 more here. Got 10 comments. I can't see. So frustrating, guys. Keep refreshing it. It's like there's a space that's blank where there should be questions, and I see hello from Amy, hello from Melinda, hello from Christy. Okay, I'm gonna keep refreshing it till hopefully I can see it. I'm gonna answer these last two questions though, and anything that's in there that was a question, I promise I'll go back and I'll get it for you later. I'll answer it later tonight. Okay, Clara said, how do I keep and maintain positive energy, thoughts, and vibes? Great question. The world, there's a lot going on in the world that brings us down. There's a lot of reasons to feel like we're surrounded by negative energy. So how do we regulate that and help that? So the first thing, regular self-care. I feel like I say that a lot, but it's because it's the answer to a lot of things. Regular self-care, it can really, really help. Now let's talk about this energy wise, because there's a couple components here, energy and thoughts and vibes. So energy wise, really seeking to balance your energy centers is important. So there is a constant dialogue that your body is having with you. It's constantly telling you where your energy is not flowing optimally. Okay. So right now, I'm having some neck things going on into my shoulder. So what this is telling me is, okay, there's something going on. I've probably been sitting at the computer too long. I got text neck, things like that. But it's also telling me that energetically, I need to work with the heart chakra and the throat chakra. Okay, so if I have an issue with my knee, obviously there's something wrong with my knee. Maybe I need a doctor. Maybe I need a chiropractor. Maybe I just need rest. Or maybe I need, and in addition to that, that's also telling me that there's an issue with my root chakra. Okay, so my energetic work will be in my root chakra when I'm having an issue with my knee. So headaches, third eye, right? So our body is constantly telling us, constantly trying to communicate with us and tell us where we need to work energetically. So that would be the first thing, is just kind of really pay attention to that, and that gives you a place to start with which chakra to work with. And so what happens is that when you start to balance the chakra system, you're going to find it's much easier to have positive vibes, to balance the vibration of energy around you. Now, working with your thoughts a lot of times has to do with limiting beliefs. They say that we think 80,000 or some things, that thoughts a day. Most of them are negative and they're irrelevant to the situation, worries about things that will never happen. And so we need a way to combat this. So here's a couple of thoughts. One is to turn the negative thoughts into positive ones. If a thought says, I will always be poor, and you hear that in your mind, you just stop, take a breath, and then change it to I will always have abundant wealth or something. It doesn't matter if it's not true. You're just going to change it and say it, because your thoughts have so much power. Okay, so the more that we kind of have the negative ones going, we're not combating them. We're just feeding them, and we're just allowing them to create our reality. But if we switch it, even if we don't believe it, and we just try to do this habitually, you'll find that your thoughts begin to change, and that actually starts to change your energy and everything around you. So another thing is this idea of, I love this metaphor, but Lakshmi versus Lakshmi. So you don't have to believe in Hindu deities to do this. This is just an example I'm going to give you, but I think it can be relevant to everyone. So in Hindu pantheon, there is a deity called Lakshmi, and she is the goddess of abundance and fertility and prosperity and wealth and joy and good things. Okay, and then she has a counterpart who is named Lakshmi, and Lakshmi is everything that Lakshmi is not. It's the negative, dark. No, it's the lack. It's the everything that she is not. Poorness and poverty, and so ancient people would, if they were trying to do some kind of a fertility working or an abundance working in their village, they would actually send a party of people out far away from the village who would take these offerings, like these nasty offerings, like burnt offerings, things that would be unacceptable to the other gods, gross things, and they undesirable things. They would take them far away from the village and they would offer them to Lakshmi. And the idea here is that the Vedas tell us that where one is, the other can't be. So where Lakshmi is, Lakshmi can't be. And where Lakshmi is, Lakshmi can't be. So the thought was, is they go and they offer all these offerings to Lakshmi that she's going to like, all the gross stuff. She's going to stay far away from the village. And meanwhile, the people in the village are going to have all their happiness and abundance. So we can bring that into our modern day thinking too, right? Where one thought is, where prosperity is, there can't be lack. Okay, so we just, every time, I tell myself, every time I have these negative thoughts and I find myself just kind of moving and falling into them, I say, oh, there's Lakshmi. And I'm like, I'm not going to listen to this. And so I just changed my mindset to drawing in Lakshmi, or drawing in more of that abundant and positive energy. So that can sometimes help. And then another thing is just purifying breath work. So just if you're really having a lot of negative thoughts, you can do some breath work. So deep calming breath can help. The lion, or the breath of fire, or the dragon's breath. This is a quick breath where you just put your hand on the belly and just imagine you were like fogging up a mirror. And then you close the mouth and breathe like that for a minute. That can be very helpful for purifying the negative thoughts that are coming through. So hope some of those ideas help. If you want more though, Clara, definitely reach out. Okay, and I'll give you some more suggestions. And then finally, Lisa said, what exactly qualifies a person to identify as a witch? I know I'm a light worker because I've formerly been trained in Reiki. I learned what I had been doing most of my life, and now I just have a label for it. So are there things that have to be done to be a witch? So great question. Very, very good question. Okay, some disagreement on this, but I'm gonna give you my honest opinion. Okay, so in my honest opinion, you're a witch if you call yourself a witch. Just like a Christian is a Christian if they call themselves a Christian. They don't necessarily have to go to church. There's some that do, there's some that don't. If you call yourself a witch, you are a witch. Now, you don't need formal training to be part of the craft. There are many solitary practitioners. I was not part of any groups for the first few years that I was studying. I studied on my own. Some people feel it's just simply they're just kind of called to the craft, called to the path. That's many people show up in this group for that very reason. I'm just called to be here. So in a lot of ways, it's a reclaiming too, because I think what's interesting is you mentioned that all these things that you were doing once you had that label of light worker, once you had that certification as a Reiki practitioner, you realize that all the stuff that you were already doing all through your life was that stuff. Now you just have you have a label to put on it, right? So same thing with witches. Many people will feel like I was doing this my whole life. Now I have a word that says it, right? So in a lot of senses, it's like a reclaiming, a coming home for many people. So many people find that that is enough for them. They become solitary practitioners. They work on their own. Maybe they join groups like this. They interact with other like-minded souls. And then for others, they want some formal training. You don't need this, but some people seek it out. Just like there's Christians who don't go to church, and there's ones that do. Some seek it out, some don't. So if you wanted more formal training, once you kind of realize I'm a witch and I'm on this path, lots of things. You can seek out books. I love the author Christopher Penczak. I'll recommend him over and over and over again to people. If anyone's on a Wiccan path, I love the author Raven Grimassi. And he passed away recently, but a lot of his books that were out of print, they're now back in print. He's a great author. Raymond Buckland, Scott Cunningham, just search out some of the classic books like that. And you could learn a lot from the books. You could seek out mentorship. You can seek out covens. They can be a little bit harder to find, but they're there, they're around. Some are in person, some are online. You can seek out training courses as well. But the bottom line is that you don't need to do any of that to be a witch. Just simply saying you're a witch and being on the path is enough. Okay, so I hope that helped. And let me just see if I can see any questions. Now I see there comments. There's 10 here. Yeah, so it tells me like a little icon says 10 and I don't see it. So I'll be going back in and answering these in just a bit. Sorry, guys. Hope this will be corrected by the next time. It happened once before and then after that it was fine. So, all right, so coming up, just wanted to give you a heads up on next week. I'm doing an episode on the new moon because next Wednesday will be the actual new moon. So we're going to do an episode on new moon magic, what to do on the new moon. I'll be giving you some ideas of some spells to try. And then the week after that, I think that's 8/23, I believe I'm doing an episode on types of witchcraft, thanks to Felicia's question. So I've been wanting to do that episode, so I'm going to do that. And then also I let you know that we have our Shadow Seekers membership is opening up again near the end of the month. There'll be more details coming soon. So those who've been waiting to join us, you're going to have an opportunity here at the very end of August it'd be early September. We're going to kick it off with I think it's going to be a brand new workshop I'm going to be doing free, and then that's going to kick off our enrollment period of about a week will be open. So more details will be coming for those who want to join us. And until next time, blessed be.